wanted to go ahead and do a second part of my Hoya cabinet tour. These are my Detolfs. This is one of them right here. I use these for plants that require less light and less humidity. I have one on each side, and I thought that I would go ahead and show you them today. This particular Detolf keeps an average humidity of about 45 to 65%, and it has a little bit lesser light than my other two cabinets. So for this cabinet, I keep cooler growing Hoyas and Hoyas that require less light because they like to keep darker leaves. This is the first one I have. This is the graffiti. It's not a splash, however, mine does have quite a bit of splash. So it's kind of nice. I got this as a trade. It had about 5 leaves. It's in pond. It's got amazing root system. I really need to get it out of this cup. I basically just added a makeshift little trellis to wrap up the vines. It's got a new leaf right here, and all the rest of this is pretty new. But it grows, it likes to stay damp at all times. It responds pretty well to low light, and it's a really good grower. It grows really fast. This is my Fuwaensis. This plant has been kind of a struggle for me. I received it in pretty much the same condition as I have it now. I've had a couple new leaves on this. I received these as 4 separate cuttings. I had to reroot them because the first time I rooted them, they rotted. So I cut the roots off and put them in another self-watering pot in pond with a wick, like I talked about in my first video. So like this is a new leaf, this is a new leaf, this is a new leaf, and these are new leaves. So this is my Fuwaensis. This beauty is my Linearis. I love this Linearis. It is so full and so nice. I received this for Christmas last year. I just took the scissors to this. It was about twice as long, but unfortunately it had lost some leaves. So what I decided to do was to trim everywhere where they had bare nodes, at least 2 bare nodes, and then I propagated that. What I'm gonna do is after those propagations grow roots, I'm gonna put it back in this pot. I'm gonna pot it all, and I'm gonna have a really beautiful full pot, because these are all have complete leaves, no missing leaves, and so the other propagations that I have don't have missing leaves either. So hopefully I'll have a nice full bushy Linearis without any missing leaves. So that would be great. This is in soil. It arrived to me in soil. I don't really like to keep Hoyas in soil, but the Linearis likes to have more wet roots than even pond likes. It's kind of more of a dampness that it likes to keep on its roots than even pond can like, but it likes to dry out further than pond can dry out. So really with a Linearis, soil is the only way I can go to keep it alive. So that's what I do. I water it about once a week or once every 8 or 9 days, normally is when I water, and it's doing great. So that's my Linearis. This is my Angleriana. I received this as a rooted cutting from a friend for giving her some miticide that I had. So it was a really nice trade. I really appreciated that. I like to let them get roots and then take them out. So I'm probably going to be transferring this pretty soon. I actually gave this quite a bit of a haircut to give to another person. So it's quite a bit shorter than it was before. As you can see, I cut it there. It's already got new growth, so it's a very fast grower. Finally, for the top shelf is my Matilde Splash. I received this as a 2-leaf rooted cutting, and it has a lot of splash. As you can see, it's produced some very high splash leaves. This I have in leca right now. It's one of the only plants I have in leca. I put all of my plants in leca when I first converted to semi-hydro about a year ago. It's not doing its best life, which means that I really need to probably take it out. I may need to trim roots. I may need to reroot it. I find that it doesn't transfer very well from leca to pon because the roots seem to be a little thinner in the middle of the root ball with leca than it is with pon. Pon roots with Hoya seem to spread out all over the whole pon cup. But with leca, it forms a root ball very close to the stem, and that root ball tends to be very, very fragile, very thin roots. And for me, that doesn't do very good. This Hoya, I can tell, probably needs some help because it's not very big. It hasn't really grown much. It's got this new growth right here, but that's pretty much it. I mean, it's not really growing very much, and so I think it needs rerooting. But that's it for the top shelf. Now we're going to go to the next shelf, the second shelf in my Detolf. First off is this rosita. I received this at a plant swap, but it's kind of unusual, and maybe you can help me with this. These are the original leaves, these elongated pointy leaves. But in my care, it's only grown 2 elongated leaves, but the rest have grown this small rosette of little leaves. And I can't really figure out why it would grow in that pattern. I have a couple of Hoyas that grew in that pattern that were cuttings, and I'm a little curious as to why, because I've never really seen that. So if you've had that happen, go ahead and put it in the comments and let me know what it is that caused that, what you did to change that, because it doesn't really look too much like a rosita right now. So the next Hoya is my sigillatus. This is a problem child. Now, yes, the cutting I did get was much smaller. The cutting was only about this big when I got it, and it only had 4 or 5 leaves. And it did grow, grew a long stem, and I cut it up into pieces. But as you see, it hasn't really put any new growth since then. I had 4 new leaves come on this stem, and there are 2 new leaves on this stem, but it's not really done much. This is just a two leaf cutting. I have one here and I have one here, and those have done nothing. Those are barely rooted, and I cut this up and I put this in this 4-inch self-watering pot in pon with a wick about 4 months ago. Yes, it's a big pot for such a small amount of cuttings, but the reason I did it is I wanted the plant to root in pon and stay in pon, and I figured if I had 5 cuttings in a 2-inch cup, it would outgrow that really quickly, and then I'd have to transfer it into a 4-inch pot anyway. It takes longer. It's not a faster process, but it does achieve the same results. This is my Matilde. This is the regular Matilde. This one has graced me with 4 peduncles, I see. Nope, 5. This is actually 2 pots, 2 Hoyas put into 1 pot. I received a gift of a 2-leaf 1-node cutting from a friend back in 2020, late 2020. It was like my introductory Hoya, teaching me how to root Hoyas, how to keep Hoyas alive, how to take care of Hoyas when you did them wrong. I killed it so many times. It stayed 2 leaves for a year. It was originally in cocoa husk. I took it out. I had it in soil for a while. I had it in leca for a while, and now I have it in pon, and it's much happier in pon. This is also a combination of another cutting I received. It had about 6 leaves. So this is actually not just the 2-leaf 1-node cutting. This is also another plant. But as you can see, it's grown quite a bit. and it seems to be very happy in its place right now. This is one of my favorite plants. This is the balanoides. I received this as a cutting. Let me show you. It had this leaf right here, and this leaf right here, and this leaf right here. These were the original leaves. Oh, I see a new leaf right there. Great, new leaf right there. It had these 3 leaves when I got it, and the rest of this is what grew after I cut and propagated the original plant. I kept it in high light at first. I actually had very poor growth. It grew this terrible little leaf in high light. It grew this little leaf in high light. So I put it in this Detolf cabinet here with the lower light and lesser humidity, and it grew this leaf right here, which was so much larger than every other leaf I had had. I was so amazed. I was like, oh my goodness, this is such a huge leaf. Then I put it from the darker shelf I had to the second shelf, which has a little bit more light because it gets light from the window more. And then it produced this leaf, which is still hardening off. It's still very, very thin. But it produced this leaf, which is almost 13 inches long. And I'm gonna do a Kaylee Ellen head test, but look at this leaf. Can you believe it? It's so big. And it came from the same plant that produced this tiny little leaf. So it just shows you that if you change the conditions of your plant, if it's not happy in one area, just put it somewhere else, because you never know the true potential of your plant. I never knew the true potential of this plant till I moved it, and I'm so happy I did. This is my Verticillata hot champagne. I think that's how you pronounce it. I received this as a unrooted cutting as a gift. I do believe it had 2 leaves. It had this leaf, and maybe this leaf. But since then, it's grown quite a bit. It's put off a new. That's very strange. This is kind of weird. It put off a new tendril, but it's only halfway attached to the node. So that's kind of weird. That may be why it's dying. I think I need to trim that off. But it does have 2 new leaves right there. I had it up closer to the light. I did take a cutting from it, so that could explain why it's still quite small. But it's really nice. It has very, very thick leaves. They're very smooth. They're kind of cupped on the edges. I don't see it around too often, this particular variety. So I was really glad to have it. It has just the tiniest little bit of splash, but it's the Verticillata hot champagne. This is a mixed bag. Maybe you can help me out with this one. I do believe this has 2 different plants in the same pot, but because I am not that good at distinguishing different leaves of this kind of shape, maybe you can help me in the comments and let me know. I know that this is a Cipitingensis. I know that it is because this is my original plant. I rooted this, and I was intending to put the other Cipitingensis in with it. So I grabbed some cuttings. I grabbed these cuttings right here, and I put them in place. But I don't think they're Cipitingensis. I do believe that these might be Nicholsoniae yellow. I'm not sure. And also, the reason why I believe that might be Nicholsoniae yellow is it's growing in this rosette pattern that I talked about on my other Nicholsoniae yellow. So I really believe that I put 2 different plants in one pot, but maybe you can give me an idea and give me a sense as to whether or not I put 2 plants in one pot. The Cipitingensis does sun stress really nice. The Nicholsoniae yellow really doesn't. The next plant I have is an Irina. This is very close to a Nicholsoniae. The only difference is it has more rounded leaves, and it has leaves that are more, have a point on the tip. It's got a new growth point here. It's got this long tendril here that's fairly new. I'm hoping will produce some leaves. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nodes on this stem. So I'm hoping that I get some leaf growth from that. And I hope I get some leaf growth from this stem down here too. It desperately needs a repot. It is completely root bound in the stratum, and it's also dry. It dries out really fast. So I think it's high time I get it into a 4-inch self-watering pot with pond and a wick. With my Millsbo cabinet, I like to use wicks with self-watering pots because I was using them with a traditional reservoir 1/3 of the way full, and I found that in that case that the roots rotted. This is a good example. This is a carnosa Wilbur Graves Russia with low variegation. This is a reverted one. This cutting I got as 2 leaves. As you can see, it's done nothing since. It's got a new leaf. It's got a new leaf right there. But as you notice, see, it's got stuff. Because the reservoir goes 1/3 of the way up the net pot, these roots that go down here, they're not really water roots. They're not really pond roots. They're kind of in between. And they're not very healthy in my experience with my plants. They're not very healthy. So this plant right here is trapped in a very poor growing system. This needs to come out ASAP. And when I do, this will start growing again. Finally, this is my second Calistophylla. This is the one that I grew from 3-leaf cutting. I thought this plant was going to do nothing for the longest time. When I had flat mites about a year ago, and didn't know what was going on, this was one of the plants that was affected with this. This has such a woody stem, and this does not grow anything to save its life. I was so surprised when it started growing a new leaf. It grew this new leaf right here, and it grew this new leaf right here, and it grew this new leaf right here. But it's also done peduncles, and this thing blooms almost continuously. It's got this peduncle right here. It's got this peduncle right here, and it's got a peduncle right here. It's done blooming for a while. This one has done pretty good. It's more focused on blooming than leaf production, which I guess can be a good thing. I'd rather have it produce more leaves. I already have another Calistophylla that blooms all the time. I guess that's probably not a bad problem to have. I really wish this would produce some more leaves. I recently repotted it. Like I said, you know, this is going to be a repeated thing. 4-inch self-watering pot with pond with a wick in it. Sorry, that's just the way I roll now. You know, I'm hoping that repotting it in that and starting the roots over will give it a new, stronger root system that will be able to support a larger plant. This is my second Detolf cabinet. This cabinet contains more humidity and has higher light than the first Detolf cabinet that I showed you. This I keep my plants that have come out of the Millsbo but still need higher humidity. This cabinet maintains a humidity level of 65 to 75%. So this one is pretty close to what my Millsbo is. My Millsbo generally runs about 65 to 85%. So I'm going to show you the plants in here, and then I'm going to show you a couple that are outside the cabinets, and then the tour will be done. This is my Cagayanensis. This plant is actually a cutting of my mother plant, but it has done so well, it's practically a mother plant in and of itself. I love this plant. It has a shimmery sheen to the leaves that is hard to tell in regular light. Grows very well. I've also had this flower. My mother plant has flowered. It required very high light to flower. So high that it bleached the plant, and I would rather not do that again. So I did move it into this Detolf, so you'll see the mother plant in a couple of minutes. This is my ovifolia. This is kind of a unique little Hoya. The leaves are very thick. They're very sturdy. They curve and bend as they grow. They do not grow cup like the Verticillata hot sun pain I showed you a little earlier. That's just how it grows. When you sun stress it, it produces a beautiful grape purple. The new leaves kind of turn purple too. And you can kind of see it on the back a little. This is kind of like a dupe for a GPS 7240 if you're just looking for the grape color. This is my Globulosa. I love this plant. I got this plant as a 2-leaf cutting. This was the original leaf, and this was the original leaf. And it's grown all of this since then. It has a very sturdy stem, so this plant is really taken off. It's dark, it's fuzzy on the underside, it's very velveteen-like. It's pretty smooth on the opposite side. It has abs, it has ridges to it. It's a very fast-growing plant. I've not had any problems with it. It can be a little sensitive with the roots. I did have to reroot this once when it was a smaller plant. I just up potted it to a 5-inch self-watering pot in pond because it outgrew its 4-inch pot. So this is Globulosa. I love it. You can't go wrong with it. Finally, this is one of my newest acquisitions. This is a Hoya lacunosa inner variegated. This came to be rooted in moss. I took it out of the moss and put it in pond. I left it for about 2 weeks to acclimate to my conditions before I took it out of the moss. Normally when I have plants in a certain substrate, I leave it in that substrate because that's what it grew in, that's what it's used to. I adapt to its condition rather than its condition adapt to me. But with moss, it's a little bit of a different situation. I tend to rot things in moss because moss is so easy to overwater. You have to wring it out if you want to get out the water. If anything is a little too wet on the roots just melt away. I've just never had any luck with moss. So I don't have any plants in moss. Well, I do have a prop box with melanochrysums, but that's not Hoyas. This plant, I love it. It came in such great condition that it only lost one little leaf on this node right here, but these two baby leaves that were only about 1 millimeter long, they were literally just 2 hands, have grown and opened up since I put it in ponds. This is a plant I'm really happy to have, and I can't wait for it to grow bigger. This is my Scotch etini. This lives on the second shelf of my Detolf cabinet. I did have this originally in my Millsbo cabinet on the second shelf where it received very high light. That's why you see the sun stressing on it. Unfortunately though, it wasn't really growing because when you sun stress Hoyas, they don't grow as fast. So I took it out of the Millsbo and I put it onto the second shelf here in the Detolf with higher humidity. And as you can see, it's got a growth point right there. It's got a node there. It's got a new leaf there. It's got 2 new leaves right there and both look healthy. And then it's got another node right there. And of course the growth tip on top is still going. So I'm hoping to get some growth out of this. I've had this plant for quite a while actually, and it really did nothing. I am kind of a chronic underwaterer, unfortunately, but it's doing quite well now. I see roots sticking out of the soil, so it's probably time for an up pot. This is one of my recent acquisitions. This is a Nova Ghost. This is not a gray ghost. This is a reverted Argentea princess. I do believe it's an Argentea princess, not the Picta. So this is a reverted one. I love it because it has so much silver, just the tiniest little hint of green. The leaves are nice and rounded, a carnosa round. And it's very sturdy. It's very thick, very succulent, like a carnosa leaf. I'm hoping that it grows pretty quick. It's rooting right now. I bought it as an unrooted cutting. So I'm hoping that it'll grow soon. I've heard that it grows better and faster than a gray ghost. My daughter has a gray ghost and hers actually grows fairly quickly. So I'm hoping to get some new growth out of this fairly soon. The one thing I have learned, and I learned this from Miro from Basie Plants and also from Betsy Begonia, is that these plants, these silver plants, like lower light. If you put this high silver in high light, you will get more green. So it's not a high light, high silver type of a situation. Kind of like my balanoides, where it produced that very large, very dark green leaf. Sometimes the Hoyas, all they need is just a ambient room condition, not high light, they all don't need high light. And the gray ghost, or the Nova Ghost is one of them. And thank you, Miro and Betsy, for letting me know. This is one of my favorite plants. This is my Nicholsoniae New Guinea Ghost. I got this when it was 2 leaves. I promptly rotted the roots. Promptly. I mean, we're talking like 2 days I rotted the roots and I thought the plant was going to die. So then my friends helped me. They said root in water. So I rerooted it in water and the plant survived. I kept it for the longest time in a very high light situation. It was in a cup rather than a pot, a 4-inch pot. As you can see, this plant sun stresses a beautiful purple. It's absolutely gorgeous, the purple it stresses. This is faded now, but you can see the purple that it stresses too. Unfortunately though, this is a really fast grower and it wasn't growing very fast in the high light. So when you take it out of the high light, the plant can put more energy into growing new leaves, and that's what it's done. Since I put it in, it's grown this new tendril, which it's got a new leaf right there. It's got a new leaf right there. I do believe I saw another new leaf. Yes, I did. Right there is another new leaf. It's got 2 new leaves up here. So it's just growing all over the place. And it produced this really long leaf as soon as it got out of the highlight. This was the first leaf it produced. And as you can see, it's very large. Lower light, larger leaves. This is my Colina IR26. This plant I got for my birthday, which was October, so I've had it a while. The plant was this when I got it. It grew all of this since then, which is not exactly an amazing amount of growth. It was in highlight, so I took it out of the highlight. I put it into the Detolf for its lower light. It did start growing a lot faster. I did notice the very small leaves, kind of like that rosette type leaf that I was talking about earlier. It hit some of the other plants. So I'm not for sure if that was what was going on with this or not, but I took it out. It's doing a lot better. I really like it. Its sun stress is really gorgeous. This was a wish list plant for a long time. This is my Hoya gading. I love the plant for the sun stressing it gets. With barely any light, this plant will sun stress a beautiful color. It does not need intense light. You can see what it looks like where the leaf is covered. I did have some new leaves try to grow right there in the bottom, but they both fell off. But it's got a node here, a node here, a node here that grew a new leaf, which I'm very happy about. And it's got, looks like the tip died off. So I'm gonna have to trim that off. Hopefully though, these other nodes will start producing leaves. It was also on the highlight shelf. I took it off, put it in the Detolf where it's still getting lots of humidity. It's still getting fairly decent amount of light. But as you can see, the new leaf, there's no sun stressing on it. It is green. And I love the parallel lines on this gading. It's not like a Nicholsoniae, it's not like a Calistophylla. It's its own unique vein. And this is my undulata. It's kind of hard to see. I'll kind of hold it at an angle so you can see the side view of all the leaves, because there's more leaves than what you can see on the top view. Now I also had this in a highlight condition, and you can see the sun stressing, the very beautiful purple sun stressing the Hoya got. I put it into the lower light Detolf and it produced this massive leaf. It's just now hardened off. It's very soft. It's very smooth compared to cardboard-like undulata leaves that are normally here. This is very smooth, almost pliable. So it's amazing how lower light can change things. This leaf also was produced in lower light, and this leaf is also smooth and is more pliable, whereas these are formed in a stiff position and don't move. This is my Honhe. I don't know what color of flower this is. It has not produced a peduncle yet. Right now, it's just kind of an in-between type stage. It was growing very well at first. I took a couple of cuttings off of it, and then it kind of took a nosedive. I had to redo the roots. I see one root down reaching in, so that's pretty good. Seems like it's recovered fairly well. This is a new leaf right here. It does have a new leaf right here. This is my Verticillata heart leaf splash. This is another Hoya that's very similar to my Honhe. It started off as a very small cutting. I'll put a picture up so you can see it, like with all the others. I took cuttings off of it. It didn't do very well. I ended up cutting it into a couple of pieces and rerooting it in a self-watering pot. It's got some roots. See if I can't not drip on the floor. So it's getting there. I cut off the roots about 4 months ago. I don't really see any new growth yet. Hopefully I will soon. This is cuttings from an enduensis. I had a plant. I rotted the roots. Unfortunately, I have to start all over again. I was given a small cutting about this size. I'll show you the picture. My friend Tabitha, who gave me the cutting, told me that it was very difficult to root. She suggested I try it in pond. I had an easy time rooting it the first time. After that, not so much. I cut it into pieces and I put it in pond here in this cup. It's pretty much done nothing except drop leaves and produce little root nubs about 1 millimeter long. I thought I saw some new leaves on one of the cuttings. I see some new leaves right there, but that's the only, and then this is a new leaf. And that's the only new growth that this has had. And I've had this for about 2 months now. So this is fairly disappointing. So if anyone has any ideas on how to better and more quickly root this plant without rotting the stem, please let me know in the comments because I would appreciate it. This is my mother plant of Cagayanensis. Sorry about the pronunciation. It is thankfully not so sun bleached anymore. This is the original leaf that I got. It had 3 leaves on the original cutting. You can see that it's still pretty sun bleached. The rest of the leaves, this is a new leaf, this is a new leaf. The rest of the leaves have darkened back to their more natural color. This is a new leaf right here. It's got a new growth point right here with a new leaf here and a new tendril and leaf here. And it's got a new leaf here and a new leaf here. It's also got 3 peduncles. It's got a peduncle here, it's got a peduncle here, and it's got a peduncle right here. This plant bloomed for me in very high light. The dots you see on the plant, I don't believe they're fungal. I do believe they're sunburn. I'm checking this out. I've sprayed this once with Physan 20 just in case it is some sort of a fungal issue. It produced blooms off of 1 peduncle, which is this peduncle right here. These peduncles budded up, but nothing really has happened. I do believe that this does require highlight to bloom because ever since I put it back in lower light, it's done nothing. This is just the remainder of my Linearis cuttings. As you can see, I'm just rooting them in water and I'm going to be adding them back to the mother plant. I think propagating, if you have a straggling plant, a plant that has long stems with missing leaves, It just doesn't look the best anymore. Trim those off. Take cutting, grow the cuttings, put them back in the pot. You'll have the most amazing plant. It doesn't take anything more than just some time to chop and prop and some time for roots to grow. So that's my third shelf. Okay, we're on the fourth and final shelf on my second Detolf. I'm gonna start with this. This is my Morellii. This actually is two separate plants. I received one as a gift and I purchased one. I had them separate for quite a while and I finally put them both together just very recently, as in yesterday, recently. This was a plant that was in soil. This plant over here has shinier leaves, and this plant was in pond. So it's kind of interesting what they grew in kind of influenced how they appear, at least on the initial cuttings, I should say. So this is my Morellii. Kind of hard to trellis. It's just got this straight stem that I don't really know quite what to do with, but hopefully I'll figure it out by the time it grows a little bigger. A lot of these are just cuttings from other plants like this. This is a cutting from my Surrey Gowensis. You'll see the mother plant in just a second. I had root mealies on my mother plant of my Surrey Gowensis, and it was an enormous plant. I took it out to up pot it and found root mealies instead. But I ended up having to cut all the roots off, cut it up, and put it in a smaller pot. So that was quite upsetting. But this is a cutting from it. I have to hold it down because it keeps popping out of the cup. It's very unwieldy. This is a true Surrey Gowensis. These things do not mind for anybody. They make a mess. This is a cutting of a balanoides. As you can see, it's got a new little leaf right there and a new growth point here. It's got a node right here, but I don't think that's gonna produce anything. The leaf got damaged right there. It doesn't look like it hurt the plant any. You can see this plant is due for a repot. It's got roots sticking out of the pond. This is how I like to grow my alocasias most of the time, in leca. And unfortunately, this is bone dry. I need to definitely water this. I think alocasia corms do very well in leca. They sprout fairly easily. I have a lot of corms right now that are in pond and leca, probably about 20. This is the first one to sprout. They're cute little plants. I have kind of a problem when they get bigger, but when they're small, I don't have a problem with them. These are two examples of rotundifolia in stratum. These can be fairly difficult to root and to grow, as I've been told. My mother plant arrived to me as a rooted cutting, so I didn't have to go through the turmoil of rooting it on my own. So I took some cuttings and I tried to do it, and these cuttings grow very slow. This one finally has a new growth here, and this one put off a new leaf here. But these do take a long time to grow, but once they start growing, they really take off. Finally, I want to show you this, and I want to ask your opinions on this. Please sound off. This is my Elliptica. I started this Elliptica as a 5-leaf fresh cutting. This is all propagations from that one stem. It's kind of a mess, and I don't really know what to do with it. This did get hit by the false mites. You can see things like aborted growth points there and aborted growth point there. It still does not do well. The leaves it produces are very, like this would be a perfect leaf right here. But what it produces instead are these terribly wonky leaves. Let me find a good one. This stem right here that just rotted off for no reason. This plant's just, I don't know. I don't like it. It doesn't like me. So if you have any ideas, please put it in the comments. That's my Detolf. Thanks for joining me on the tour. Okay, real quickly, I'd like to talk about 3 plants that are not in my cabinets. And the first one is my latifolia outer variegated. This used to be a very beautiful plant on a 3-foot tall bamboo ladder. Unfortunately, when I went to go finally up pot it, after 2 years of being in a short 4-inch terracotta pot, I found root mealies. So I had to cut it all up. I was very upset. These leaves are very large. They got very large in the sun. I hated to cut it up, but you know, when you are dealing with a stem that's, you know, 6 feet long, you can't reroot a 6 foot long cutting. You have to cut it up. So it had to go. Thankfully, though, it's got this new growth point that is still active, that is still growing, and I'm hoping that it produces new. This is another cutting of a Surrey-Gowensis. I'm going to show you the mother plant here in a second. I had to cut up the plant, like I said, because it had root mealies. Here is the mother plant, what's left of it. These leaves used to be around this whole trellis and it looked just beautiful. This is my obovata. This is the first Hoya I bought locally in 2019 from a seller who went on to open a very nice plant store here in Las Vegas. It's a gorgeous obovata with nice variety of splash that does turn pink in the summer when it gets under the intense summer sun. This is just reminds me of the great things that small business sellers can do.